Hello, Food Tank Seattle. Wow, this is really a thrill to be here with all of you this afternoon. I have to say, this is one of the most important institutions, in my view, in the country. These food tank sessions bring together such energy, not just on the stage, but in the audience, the interactions that we are all able to have. And it brings home to me a really important lesson at this stage in my life as a lifelong advocate. The most important thing to remember to keep yourself going when times are a little rocky, which arguably they're a little rocky right now, is that you're not alone. You're not alone. And I don't just mean in the issue area that might be most important to you. You're not alone because there's someone working diligently, energetically, in innovative ways, in a field adjacent to you. Maybe they're working on the SNAP program and educating people about it. Maybe they're working on school lunch. Maybe they're working on farmers markets. They're bringing a creativity to the fight that should inspire you to know that we are a big army of ants and we are going to move this sucker, okay? We are going to do it. And just to be clear, there are plenty of pioneers here, and I loved hearing from them. There's plenty of young energy here. We need to go back and forth and teach each other what we are learning constantly. So thank you so much. And it's great also to be in kind of a sane place, I might say. You know, I go to Washington, D.C. a fair amount, and it's a little different than Washington State, and it begins to affect the way you think about things, the way you express yourself. I mean, I will say that as this is the inaugural Seattle Food Tank, this is my inaugural address. And this is the largest crowd that has ever been assembled for my inaugural address in Washington this year. Now, for those of you watching at home, you probably can't get a sense of the crowd. So, Danny, if we could just go to the... yeah, if we could just get a shot from the sky cam. Well, I mean, they're not even moving. They're hanging my every word, right? Yeah, I mean, I can see... Is that the Seattle Needle? From here, it looks like a little souvenir toy or something. Huge crowd, huge crowd. But the crowd that's actually here, I mean, those are facts, okay? They're facts. And Patrick Moynihan said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, right? But that's just his opinion. So, right? Yeah. And I'm sure he's still doing great work. That's probably what the president thinks. You are growing food policy by the work that you are doing every day. And I got to tell you, the most important thing we can do is to focus on things that are at the grassroots level. And the most important thing we can do is to focus on the things at the national level. And the most important thing we can do is focus on everything in between. Because we've got work to do. We're in trouble. We have a food system, as Earl Blumenauer so beautifully described it today as he sketched out his vision for a completely real farm bill, an alternative farm bill. We've got every corner of the food movement busy at work fixing something that has to be fixed, and it's a gigantic task. Let's avoid some of the fights we shouldn't be taking on, shall we? Like forget organic, eat local, right? Which is better, organic or local? Yes. Can we just give it a rest when especially the fight that is maybe more worth taking on is something like this, right? Right? Come on, this is the battlefield, not organic versus local. I mean, organic and local, all forms of agriculture are difficult. Organic and local, to me, it's like they used to say about Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. She had to do everything that he did except backwards and in heels. Well, organic and local, you're the Ginger Rogers of agriculture, okay? So let's focus on the real issues. And let's face it, Washington is taking up a lot of mind space now, and it's super disorienting. I mean, just this past week, for example, so I'm a lifetime environmentalist, right? Spent my whole career, paid professional environmentalist. So what happens this week? They remove the former head of Exxon as Secretary of State, and I'm like freaked out. Right? Right? Oh, no, not Rex. It's disorienting, right? Like I had to, no, yeah. No, of course, then again, a career in fossil fuels, and you've got a badass dinosaur name. I mean, that. It was such a good fit. It had to help him over the years. And then they replaced him with this guy, Mike Pompeo. Mike was perfect for this job too because he loves to keep secrets. Like, what's in your food? This is from our email campaign. He was the author of the DARK Act, Deny Americans the Right to Know. Everyone's forgotten that, right? Because you're focused on him as the CIA director, and now he's the Secretary of State, flying to 64 countries that have approved GMO labeling. What's he going to say in France and Italy? We have nothing to learn from you about food. So he's now going to be the Secretary of State, and that's a shame because that secrecy job was so good for him. We spent a fair amount of time and effort, as many other groups did, and here in Oregon and Washington State and the Pacific Northwest, we know we were fighting hard for GMO labeling, and they were close and hard-won fights, but we didn't win. We won the war, we just didn't lose those battles. But we were up against hundreds of millions of dollars in spending. I mean, and Washington is still awash in money. This photo, at first it bothered me, and then I thought, well, she's got a grip on those dollars. Maybe all those Dalmatian puppies got away. Right? I mean, look on the bright side. Come on. You could, right? But I've looked at this photo a million times, and I bet you have too. But if we look a little closer, I think you'll see it a little differently, right? Yeah, see? I didn't notice that first time through. Yeah, the minions are at work, and they're hard at work on food policy, and this is going to be a momentous year for it. We're teeing up a farm bill. It's been mentioned many times, starting with Earl's great presentation. And as we're thinking about local food and regional food, it's really important to remember that there's a great big pile of money that's been spent by and large by people who haven't had the interests of local food and a new food system in mind for decades. This will be my 9th farm bill. I was a prodigy, so I was super young when I started. But this is the one chart you need to see about total farm bill spending, right? So nutrition is $703 billion. That's over the next 10 years. That's the projection CBO is working from for the next farm bill. This is the so-called baseline, right? So a big part of it is the SNAP program, and the SNAP program is under attack. Work requirements that we're going to supposedly be debating and applying to the program, significant cuts. The Secretary of Agriculture, I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. Purdue, it's not naming rights. They didn't have the chicken company name the Secretary of Agriculture. That was my first thought. It really is the idea that he wants to send boxes of food to SNAP recipient families. And he likened it to Blue Apron for SNAP, right? So, but this is a lot of money, and public interest groups have been fighting for decades to put this in place. These are your allies. We don't always think of the food movement, unfortunately, as dealing with hunger. We think of it dealing with other things, but this is the safety net that we have left. If that gets cut, or diminished in any way, I think all of us in the food movement will have experienced a tremendous loss. There's nothing wrong with thinking of ways to make it better, but think about it. This program is brutally means tested. If you live in Washington or Oregon and you make about $25,000, $26,000 a year in your household of 3, and you have a little money in the bank, you're too rich for this program. It's mean tested that severely. You get about $1.40 on average per recipient per meal, right? So this is not a program where you're flush with spending. This is serving 40+ million of our fellow Americans right now, and they depend on it. Most of those households have workers. About half of the beneficiaries are kids, and a big chunk of the rest are elderly and disabled. So this program is one of the food movement's priorities, in my opinion, in this Farm Bill, and we all need to think about it. Best place for a quick read, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, check them out. They've done a great job looking at this work requirement question because it's not what it appears to be. We spent a lot of money on farm subsidies. The nutrition budget went down since the last Farm Bill. The subsidy budget went up. The spending went up. They're expecting to spend more. We have a huge amount of money in conservation. A group of us back in 1985 reformed the farm programs in ways that started to pump real money into conservation to help farmers protect their land. There are many things that's doing well, this conservation spending. Of course, over time, if you've worked on a government program, you know it can turn into spending money in kind of that big, dumb, free spending way that government programs can manage. But we still need to hang on to that money and invest it even better. That's how we can pay for organic transition. That's how we can pay for support for local farmers to do conservation work. But the rest, look at that. That little sliver is practically everything you care about, and then some. A tiny amount of money over 10 years. It's $11 billion over 10, right? So let's take a look also at how we spend it on. There's our Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. Yeah, I don't think he eats from boxes of food. Farmer spending. All right, this is what we spend on farmers. $31 billion over 10 years on crop insurance. We'll be spending $38 billion on commodity programs, and then a significant chunk on conservation. This kind of investment, if we tweak it, shift it in a way that benefits fruit and vegetable growers, local growers, all the priorities that we've been talking about today, for pennies on the dollar. And let me just tell you the most important thing about these charts. This is your money. It's your money. It's not the Agriculture Committee's money. It's not farmers' money. It's not food stamp recipients' money. It's taxpayers' money. And for that reason, we have every motive to get up, get involved, and tell people on Capitol Hill what we want, right? Nothing. We're spending next to nothing. And I'm not saying local food should become wards of the state. I'm just saying that for modest amounts of money, we can invest in these local slaughtering facilities. We can invest in these local food hubs. We can build some of this infrastructure, or it will be spent elsewhere, let me tell you, and not for things you necessarily want. My day job is Environmental Working Group by night. I'm with Food Policy Action, an organization that a small group of us started some years ago to create basically a League of Conservation Voters for Food. Across the food movement, we wanted to hold politicians accountable for how they voted on food. And so we started keeping score. This is the scorecard map from our site. You can click on any state. Up comes your senators. Up comes your House delegation. These are samples. We just happened to pull the samples from Washington. You've got some great performers. You've got some middling performers. And you've got some not so good performers in the delegation. These votes are scored by the following process. Great experts who lobby day in and day out for the public interest, for progressive interests on Capitol Hill. Look at all the votes in a year or in a session, a 2-year session of Congress, and they decide what votes are really critically important to the food movement, which ones really matter. It's a fantastic process. We've now done it 6 times. We've got 6 years worth of data. So for the first time this year, for example, with the House of Representatives, we will be able to tell you, and we'll be telling you in about a month, how your members of Congress who've served during that entire period of time and are incumbents now, how they voted on 53 high-priority food policy votes. 53. And you can probably tell from looking at that how likely they are to improve. Some of them have over time, or how many of them turn out to have been voting wrong consistently. I mean, we have in this tabulation Dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are 100% with the food movement voted right, and we have many dozens who are zeros. Every single time for 53 votes, they voted wrong. So keep your eye for that report that's coming out from Food Policy Action. So how does food policy grow, the theme of this conference? How can it shape our politics? How do we get food to finally be a kitchen table issue? How has every other issue been a kitchen table issue until now but food, which is actually on the kitchen table while you're talking about all the other issues? How did that happen? And here's what I think. I think we are so focused and so good at doing our work and keeping our head down and working even in coalitions but around individual issues that we forget that at the values level, we are all behind the same good food movement. We just have to enunciate them. Let me take a crack at it, right? How many of you think that kids in this country should go to school in the morning and go to bed at night with a full tummy and ready to go, right? Yeah, okay? How many of you think that agriculture should regenerate the environment instead of degrade it? Yeah? How many of you think that workers in the food system ought to be treated with dignity and justice and equity and fairness? How many of you think that when we deal with animals in agriculture, they should also be treated in a way that's humane and respects their lives? And on. Food should be safe. It shouldn't kill you when you eat it. We should have conservation programs that make sense and give farmers a leg up when they're trying to do the right thing and they can't afford to pay the full freight. Value after value after value unites us. We just don't spend our days necessarily talking about all of them. I know a lot about the SNAP program because it's just been a priority for EWG for several farm bills. We're an environmental group. We just decided if you're concerned about toxic chemicals in the food kids eat, shouldn't you be concerned that kids have enough to eat? And so we said, yeah, the SNAP program's our priority, our number one priority as an environmental group in the Farm Bill. That kind of transformation for us has meant that we are now much more able, I think, to share at the values level, and that's a different kind of listening than listening about details, programmatic facts and figures, information that is entirely rooted in expertise. I'm talking about how does this whole food movement feel? And it feels like we've got our work cut out for us, and it feels like what we've been handed isn't doing the job we need to do for our health, for our planet, for our kids, for our workers. We need to fix the whole frickin' thing, top to bottom, right? Food policy action, we worked for that day in and day out. And I have to say that one of the main institutions that gives me hope for the food movement is the one right here, Food Tank. Danny, you have put together, and your team, this is extraordinarily important that we get together and share ideas, share enthusiasm, share losses, share war stories that went south, and war stories that were incredible wins. We have to do all of that. And if we do, I promise you this, we can show up in the next Farm Bill and we can make a difference. Now, I just want to ask you, if the Farm Bill vote comes up and they're going to do damage to the SNAP program and take veterans off the program, as they tried to do in the last Farm Bill, active duty service members, kids, able-bodied people who just have trouble because they're in a tough job market, I need to hear an I'm in here. I need to hear. If that comes to the floor, are you going to stand up and fight for it? I'm in, right? Yeah. I'm in. And what if it looks like we're going to keep spending all that money the way we've been spending it, sending it off to commodity agriculture? They need to have a safety net. It needs to be fair. But if they decide they're going to cut funding to conservation programs in the environment, you're going to stand up for that, right? Are you in? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I'm in. I'm in. Right? And if they're going to monkey with organic rules for livestock in such a way that we can't take the next step and make livestock and organic agriculture better for animals, are you going to stand up and fight? Are you in? I'm in. this room is in, that crowd outside in the rain, listening to every word, they're in too. And believe me, I am in with you. You have inspired me today. You've lifted me up. We've got your back at EWG and Food Policy Action, and I know you've got ours. Thanks for coming.